Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And on behalf of Invest India, which is your single point of contact when you come into India, as the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency, it's my privilege to come and just present to you what we're trying to do. I think if you went through the morning, the buzzwords of the morning, if you recollect, were the bond, the special relationship. And I think this room itself bears testimony to the special relationship. I think it's not just friends. It's moved beyond that as a bond, and it is a special bond. And we would call it the same family, as it was mentioned this morning. The other buzzwords, if you notice, were the winds of change, of transformation, of what is happening. And what I just thought I'd do, I have 4 slides and I have 15 minutes. So I'll take you through as to actually what is happening in India today. And what is interesting is, before I walk into that, is that we had, in my last presentation, we had asked people to tell us what should be the title of this presentation. And we'd run a small survey on that one. And some of the thoughts which had come up were the last billion frontier, reimagining India, new India. And then there was one which was called transforming India. And the reason why, and actually that is the one which got maximum votes. And the reason why that was is that apparently this is the most unprecedented transformation in human history of the free world ever. And what I thought is I'll just take you through these few thoughts and let you think as to what is happening in India. But just sit back and think of change and transformation. And since it was a business set of people we have, I thought we'd just have numbers to tell the story today. We have 3 boxes there, and the chances on that one was, it's the socio-economic and the political transformation which is happening in India. And let me start with the bottom. It says 209 billion. That is the foreign investment, FDI, into manufacturing, which India has got in the past 36 months. The interesting point of this is that over 90% of this 209 billion was in an automatic route, which did not require government approvals. India today is one of the most open economies on the planet, with private sector having the ability to play a role in each and every segment of our economy. But the more interesting thing of that number is that close to 50% of that number was greenfield investment. India today is the #1 greenfield destination on the planet. And what that states is actually that you have a set of investors which are willing to take a long-term call on India. And why are they willing to do that? And let me just take it back to the top level of that. There's a number which says 2.6 trillion. That is the size of India's GDP today. We are the 5th largest in nominal terms. In purchasing power parity terms, that number is about 9 billion, which makes us the 3rd largest GDP in the world in terms of purchasing power parity. But what's the other interesting thing of that 2.6 trillion, and when I spoke to you about the unprecedented level of growth which is happening, and unprecedented transformation both in terms of scale and size, the first trillion took us 60 years. So we got our independence in 1947. It's only sometime in April 2007 that we hit the first trillion. The second trillion took us just 7 years. That was sometime in 2013-14, in January, when we got to our second trillion. That is the pace at which it is happening. That number of 2.6 is supposed to be about 5 trillion by 2025. And you know what is interesting of that 2.6 trillion? That 2/3 of that 2.6 trillion comes from domestic demand. And let me tell you how that is critical for all you industry captains sitting there. There was a study which is done for 2012 to 2017. 52 companies listed in India which are subsidiaries of global corporations. During this period, the global corporations' profits were going down 4.4%, 2012 to 2017. And I've taken listed figures. And you know what was happening with their Indian subsidiary? Their profits were going up by 30.6%. This domestic demand creates a set of insulation against the vagaries of the global world. And that takes me to the other figure, which is 7.4%. That is the rate at which India's GDP is growing. That is the rate at which India as an economy is growing. And it is the fastest growing, largest economy on the planet. But let me just share with you the story behind that 7.4%. So India has 29 state governments. Let me break it into three engines or three buckets of, let's say, 9 states each. Today, this aircraft is running only on one engine. And what I mean by that, we just have 9 states which are growing at 7.4% plus. The next engine is going to start firing in the next 24 months. The third engine, ladies and gentlemen, will be 36 months. What I'm just trying to say, this story has only just begun. This growth number is now at the bottom. It's like the inflection point of that hockey stick. We are at the bottom point, willing to take off. And while that is being run there, I take on to the next block. By 2025, we will be 1.5 billion people. We will be the largest human capital on the planet. And of that 1.5 billion, 1 billion will be under the age of 35. With an average age of 29, we will be the youngest nation on the planet all the way up to 2070. We'll have a workforce in excess of 850 million people. That is the workforce and the workhorse which India brings to count. And the other interesting thing on that one is, and I mentioned to you about the 7.4% growth, the other noted factor in economics being that the moment urbanization happens, that growth number takes off again. Currently, we have about 10% of the world's population living in our villages. But every minute, 30 people are moving from a village to a city in India. Every minute. By 2025, in the next 7 years, we would have created another United States of America in our urban centers. And what is happening there? I'm not just think of the entire magnitude of the availability and the opportunity of investment. We need to create 1 million jobs a month. We need to create 110 million houses in the next 5 years. We need to create 100 smart cities. And you know, on our railways itself, and why do I bring you that number? Because that is the most preferred form of movement in India. Every year, we move the entire planet on our railways. Over 8 billion people travel on our railways every year. And now let me take you down to a point down there. There's a number 5 trillion, I'm not talking of the GDP in 2025. And there's a number which says 245,000, and there's a dollar sign. As per BCG, every Indian born in 2010 on will spend $245,000 in his or her lifetime. Multiply that by 1.5 billion. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the size and the power of this opportunity. And you know what is the most interesting thing when we talk of transformation? That takes me to the last one. And I've just given you figures here of our national elections of 2014. That was the national election when Mr. Modi got into power. And this is actually the reason why I bring that up, the last big box on this slide, is the political change which is happening. And it is also to show you how this change in India which is happening is bottom up. Top down, it is the catalyst. So in this largest celebration of the free world, in our elections in 2014, we had 834 million registered voters, of which 553 million actually cast their franchise. Over 1,600 political parties, 900,000 polling booths, 5,700 candidates for 543 seats of the parliament. And you know what happened in that? re-election was in less than 0.01% of the polling booths. This exercise was performed to a sigma 6x. That is the celebration of the free world. The largest unprecedented celebration in the free world. And let me take you to the most important point on that one. There's a number there, 117 million. This was the first time voter which voted in 2014. In 2019, which is next year, we'll have 133 million new voters. The first time voters. This is the lot which is changing India. This is the passion of this new generation which is changing India. And you know what's interesting of that 133 million? 97 million are from rural India. Of that 133 million, 67 million are women. This is the foundation of the new India. These are the foundation stones of the new India. And I'll go through it very quickly because I've already taken up 8 minutes of my time. These are some of the 6 initiatives which have been started by this new government in the past 36 months. But you'll notice that 3 of them are in the same color. That is what we call as the India stack. For the first time, we have 1 billion people with a unique identity number. 1 billion people connected to a bank account and 1 billion people with mobile phones. You know what this has done in the world of business? It's unprecedented in the world of business until today and e-commerce. A company got 100 million new customers in 180 days at 1/4 the cost of acquisition or what was the global norm. So it is not just the opportunity, but the ability to access that market at a lower price point, which makes that investment far more valuable. 100 million new customers in 180 days. And let me just pick up one more on that one. Well, let me just pick up Digital India. Today we are about 460 million on the net. Just to tell you the pace at which we worked. The first 100 took us 10 years. The second 100 took us 3 years. The third 100 took us 8 months. But you know what is happening on that 462? So we are the second largest people on the net today. We are the largest, not yet on the net. That is the opportunity. But every second, 3 new people in India are accessing the net for the first time. And of those 3, 2 are accessing it from a village in India. That is the change. You remember I showed you 1.5 billion and I called it human capital and not population. What digitization is doing in India, it is bringing in inclusion. It is bringing in one market where a lady sitting in a village in the northeast making pickles can sell it to someone sitting in Delhi. It is equality. It is opportunity. And that is what is changing India, where it is bringing India onto a one level. I'll quickly go through Startup India because this is now the biggest movement which is happening in India. You know, we launched a thing called the Startup Hub in India. You should actually go on to it, it's Startup Hub. We launched it last March. From last March to today, we have 190,000 users on it. It's the world's largest startup virtual incubator. At 20,000 startups, we are the number 2 startup nation in the world, just behind the US. That's the number of startups. But at the run rate, we are already at 3 startups a day, which a little ahead of Israel. We are the number 1 nation in runner-ups, or in the number of startups per day in the world today. This actually is the biggest disruption which is happening. This is a startup. This is the movement, which is not just changing India, but is partnering India with the world to bring the best to the globe. And there's some interesting ones on it. The average age of our founders is 28 years. We have about 200 incubators and we are trying to expand that. We need about 500 before the end of this year, but we are a little slow on that one. Another interesting one, 9% of these are women. But what's more interesting, this segment is growing at 100% per annum. You know, just to talk about women empowerment and inclusion, we have 250,000 gram panchayats. So we have a trilateral democracy at the national level, at the state level, and at the village level. The village level, it's called the gram panchayat. To those 250,000 gram panchayats, which is an election at that level, at the grassroots level, there are 1 million women on those gram panchayats. That is inclusion at the bottom level. This is our relationship. We heard of this bond in the morning. But frankly, if you ask me, this just speaks of the past. Because I think this is a relationship together where it is time to hold hands and walk ahead. They spoke of the supply chain. This is a supply chain which can work very well together. They spoke of the opportunities. I'm already working on 60 investment cases coming in from Africa. The reason why that is happening is that India provides the scale where companies are making their economies of scale and then using it as a platform for global exports. That is what is happening to our automobile industry. That is what is happening to the manufacturing industry. And that's where we work together to move into a supply chain. There are few names here. They've already set the tone. It is now incumbent on everyone in this room and everyone outside, where I think the ministers did emphasize on the point. It is time we work together to move into that new world order. The opportunities are huge, and the partnerships are now better understood than ever before. It takes me to my last slide. And the reason why I bring this one up for you is that there are policies and there are opportunities, but actually what is changing India is the passion of its youth. You know, I spoke to you about that first-time voter. Let me give you the example when we set up Invest India just 3 years ago. I was on government salaries for everyone, and I was wondering where I will get the best set of people I will. Today I have 114. They are from the best institutions in India and the world. Like India, the average age of my team is 30 if you keep me out of it. But you know what's interesting? Each and every youngster in this team has taken an 8% to 97% pay cut to join. They all wanted to come and make the new India. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the passion which creates and transforms and brings to you the new India. Thank you very much.